this episode of The Scorekeepers. Join me, Daniel Farrell, as I sit down with composer and music editor Josh Trentadue as we discuss his upcoming major project, Symphony No. 1. This exciting, cross-disciplinary, collaborative work involves several people of varying artistic backgrounds and experiences. Josh will expertly weave these together into a cohesive master art piece. We also discuss the impact of band music on the greater musical literature and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on his workflow and outlook. Welcome to The Scorekeepers. Hey Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
If you don't mind, before we get started, maybe just introduce yourself to the audience. Tell them a little bit about yourself, what you do, how you got started in music.
Yeah, sure. Can do all that. I'm Josh Trentadue. I'm a composer, conductor, and arranger, and now music editor, technically. I just got a job with a publishing company that's starting out called M&M Music Press LLC. I'm their instrumental music editor. I started out with performance, really. It was piano and percussion, and actually for a year in elementary school, violin, because I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. I stuck with that for elementary, middle, and high school, really, and that's where my focus was. I didn't really start compositional track until making that decision in the middle of high school and really going into college for it for a degree and whatnot. It was just sort of like a clickable moment where I realized actual people were composers actually writing music and creating this like really inspiring and awesome art that people could connect with. I figured if there was any possibility I might be able to do that, then I thought that'd be a pretty cool thing, you know. So I went to Michigan State University for my bachelor's degree. I did mostly concert composition. And then I got my master's at New York University for screen scoring.
Whoop, whoop.
After that. Yeah. So, which was just a fantastic time. And it was great living in New York when I did.
I've always been a little curious. What prompted you to go into the screen scoring master's program?
To be quite honest with you, it was just that I needed to change. I really needed to change. My 4 years at Michigan State, as wonderful as they were, was mostly based in writing acoustic music, writing chamber music, and wind ensemble and concert band music. In my last year at Michigan State, I only really had started to dabble with like digital audio workstations and electronic music and stuff like that, to the point where I basically experimented with like a 30-minute fixed media EP as the result of that. And quite frankly, I wanted to do more. And with my grad school search, I wanted to keep my options open. And NYU was one of those places where I felt like it would be a good change for me to learn something different, to learn a different style of music.
Looking back at NYU, I know we're kind of getting into the NYU talk now, but you know, I always felt like the biggest thing I got out of the film scoring program at NYU is the production chops. You know,
definitely. If there's one thing that you learn while you're at NYU, it is using music technology. And quite frankly, I think every musician now needs to have a basic understanding of learning specific tech and equipment.
Yeah, it was very surprising to me that I got all the way through undergrad not knowing how to plug a microphone in.
Yeah, same here. I ended up really just learning it a little bit at my undergrad, but yeah, definitely more so going to film scoring at NYU.
So, I mean, you're a huge sort of advocate for band music. I know that you kind of do a lot of stuff in that area. And could you maybe talk about your various efforts that you've done to sort of expand literature in that? I know you do like Flux scores and these group commissions. Can you maybe talk about those kind of initiatives?
Yeah, definitely. I should probably mention first, the interest in band music was quite frankly because that was what I did while I was still going to school. I was a very lucky and fortunate that all of the schools I went to had well-funded, like, music programs and things like that. It is a privilege, quite honestly, but band was what I really did, um, with all the schooling. So, especially in high school, I was introduced to a lot of literature by, a great number of composers that write extensively for band music, some of whom I've actually now met or I'm good colleagues with. So my interest in that really extended from there to when I started going get a composition degree from college. It was one thing I wanted to really just like work with because comparing it to the orchestral genre, for example, the concert genre specifically, band music is still relatively young, so to speak, in comparison to that. It's been around for
Right.
about a century now, give or take, and the literature is only continuing to expand and grow, especially with the push for representing composers or more composers from all backgrounds. It's been such a wonderful and necessary push for that. And
I also feel like a lot of the more contemporary literature for band sort of plays to the strengths that it is a band. I feel like a lot of the early
yeah,
band literature is just like, how can I arrange this for orchestra, from orchestra to band? Essentially they didn't really like play to the strengths of the band.
right, right. And keep in mind too that a lot of the functions of concert band, even in the early days in America, was military based as well. We had people like John Philip Sousa writing marches for those functions, and yeah, and as you mentioned, it started out with some original compositions, but a lot of orchestral transcriptions because in that period of time, that was really what we had. But now we have more composers writing exclusively for wind ensemble and whatnot. It's just a genre that's really begun to grow on its own. So a lot of the pieces I've written for this medium, starting off with band at least, has been mostly based on my love of nature, really, or specific concepts that I'm interested in exploring. If there's like a particular emotion or a narrative or immersive concept or just even a technique that I think might be really cool or something like that. It's something in early on that I tried to imbibe in like my own comp. A lot of those initially resulted in like pieces that I wrote specifically about my home state of Michigan, which in the band world, there's quite a bit of literature that explores like different facets of Michigan, but until very recently, not too many modern compositions. And now, really, a lot of the band literature that I've written pre-pandemic has been the result of like commissioning consortiums where multiple schools or groups just come together to help fund like something because they believe in like a specific piece of art or multiple pieces that for example, some of the triptychs I've been involved in. That commissioning process is slowly coming back now that we have live music coming back safely, slowly but surely. But throughout this pandemic, really, we've had basically flex music come in to just help schools and groups just be able to have music to have their students play it while we didn't know what the circumstances of what this pandemic was going to be and what the classroom was going to look like or how many kids were going to be in there one day or the next or stuff like that. So I've been doing a lot of that lately too, mostly arrangements, but a couple original things.
What are the sort of challenges in doing the flex kind of orchestration, from an orchestration standpoint?
Well, this is something that I'm still learning even after a year, and it's something I'll probably still be learning, as time goes by. But
It's I don't know the full history of it, but it seems sort of like a newer kind of concept in the band world.
sort of, yeah, and I can't claim to know too much about this because I've only done a little bit of research, but my understanding is that this kind of music has been around for quite some time. And I'm sure if you talk to somebody with more experience, they can probably tell you, more about the genre. But this kind of music has been around, but there hasn't really been much of it really until this year, so to speak. And the whole concept for it, it's like a piece of music where you have as a minimum of really like 3 to 7 or however many parts, and the musicians play off one of those staves with their instrument in whatever transposition they have to read in, and that basically, like constitutes the framework of the piece. And most of the music that's been written or arranged or published and released now has specifically focused on that, but there's also been a lot of like there's also been optional parts included too, like if your group does actually have a percussionist or a keyboard player or a piano player or a harpist or whatnot, or things like that. And my experience with it has taken actually a little bit of inspiration from what I learned at NYU. It's just the possibility of not just you know so to speak, restricting our ears really to just acoustic instruments, if that's possible for a group to be able to do, and just sort of open up the palette, so to speak, with electronic music or hybrid orchestration, really, if you will. So, with all of the flex music that I've written and arranged, there's those main parts, but there's also a number of optional parts that are there if groups have access to them and want to use them. Like, I think all of my flex music now has at least a keyboard synth part, and every single one has like backing tracks they can play to if they need to. It just opens up the palette really to just a whole new sense of color, I think.
Been thinking like if I get a band commission, I definitely want to explore doing that kind of hybrid with electronics and things like that. Because I know I've seen it done a lot of times at marching band shows, and I'm always like, well,
Oh yeah.
let's translate that to the concert hall and do something cool with it,
Yeah,
Uh,
it definitely has been done before. Anything from fixed media to more intricate installations and playback and whatnot. It has been done before, and I've seen you know I've seen a number of pieces for that genre now that have done it really well. Really, like Stephen Bryant, for example, is one of those composers that really knows how to integrate electronic music with.
cool. So moving on to Symphony No. 1. Oh, what an undertaking.
Oh, I need a better title. I need a better title. Oh
There's nothing
man.
wrong with a Symphony No. 1. Everybody's got to have a Symphony No. 1.
I guess. I don't know.
Can you
But
tell the audience a little bit about this massive project that you're undertaking?
the whole concept for this started right before the pandemic hit. The initial thought I had for this piece was continuing something that I was already sort of exploring at this point, and that was really just a fusion of genres. Taking something that I had already been working with, this palette of whether it was band music or orchestral music, and really just bringing something else to the table and seeing how that would interplay. So the initial idea I had for this was, what if there was a piece that existed for band or orchestra, and we had a jazz combo there, and they were playing like a specific genre of jazz that's more modern, more familiar now, or something like that. How how would those two genres play off of each other? What differences would there be? How could that work, really, so to speak? It was going to be a concerto in that respect, just with those two specific elements. And so I started looking for performers to see who'd be interested in being a part of the jazz combo, and started recruiting for that. And the more I talked to the people who would eventually form this jazz combo, the more it became pretty clear to me that we all pretty much had something to say about the state of the world and what's going on right now, on a global level, on a political, on a social level, all of that. When the pandemic hit and things started to shut down, and the further this project actually progressed, the more it became pretty clear that, to me at least, that we also all had something to say about all of these things, including how the pandemic has really exacerbated a number of these issues, as many of us have seen. Over time, as we continue to develop this project, at one point we were basically still on the concept of a piece for jazz combo and band or orchestra that would talk about a specific issue from each of the jazz combo members that they're bringing to the table, that they would be writing music for. They're each writing charts. And how the pandemic has exacerbated this, and basically how we as a species are really divided and whatnot. Eventually, the idea came to introduce other multimedia and interdisciplinary elements to sort of add to that. I felt that that would be a representation of our modern world now, as opposed to, again, sort of like I talked about before, restricting the palette really to acoustic music or something like that. Because, I mean, composers don't necessarily work with that anymore, especially with like film scoring and whatnot. We're using samples and we're using electronics like that. But the last element to really come to play into this was the sound healing element, which is basically a form of meditation where you sound to like heal one's mind and body and spirit. There's more to it, and there's a spiritual element to it. But I felt that that was really important to have when our seventh project collaborator, Amy, first talked about it in our first meeting. When she brought that to the table, I felt that was important to have because I realized I didn't just want to have a piece that was just going to be 30 minutes of just angry music of people just fighting each other like all the time. With all of us each having something to say coming from our different backgrounds, whatnot for this piece, it couldn't just be something that was just conflict all the time. I felt like there really needed to be like a sense of hope and a narrative that we could overcome our divide if we all recognized the issues that are going on in our society and fight for more equitable systemic change that's beneficial for all people together. As soon as that really clicked, the sound healing element, basically asked Amy to be a part of this, and she's going to be playing on the piece as the solo flutist as well. It's just this other narrative role that's like seeking to stop all this chaos between all of these musicians. So essentially, it's a 5-movement work. Each of the combo members are also writing a little bit of their own jazz music to represent specific issues that they're talking about. Like one person, for example, is addressing the unemployment that's been going on through the pandemic, how a number of us have been affected by that. Another's talking about gender discrimination and inequality that they've experienced, especially as a freelance musician. And so basically from that, the piece is going to really function as a narrative between like this post-bop modern jazz combo and this more traditionally based, I'd say, like large ensemble band and orchestra, and they're basically just clashing with each other for much of the time. And then we have this 7th guest artist, Amy's role as the solo flutist and sound healer, who's trying to find a way for this conflict to just stop, and sort of that role just musically sort of goes on a spiritual journey, really. The piece is going to end up being an hour. I think the whole thing is going to be an hour, and 3 of the movements are officially done, locked as much as they can be at the moment, completed and sent to all the guest artists.
Right, yeah. I heard some of the excerpts on the website. This sounds fantastic so far.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited for all of you to hear the whole thing when this finally comes together. It's just it's been a little over a year now since we started this, and I'm ready to start getting this together and just having everybody start to rehearse this thing. That would be great.
I noticed on the website you were talking about implementing poets. Could you maybe talk a little bit about your ideas for implementing poetry into it?
Yeah, I can talk about that a little bit. As of now, because of everything that's been going on with the pandemic, I'm still actually working on the process of finding some collaborators to work with for things like that. But my idea for the poetry so far is basically to have it be either an extension or a representation of everything that the piece is going to talk about. So really just have it also explore and talk about, a number of these issues that are going on in our society that the jazz combo members are talking about, for example, and also being an extension of like the journey that the piece is going to go on in this quest to find like some kind of heal to all this conflict.
Could you maybe talk about, obviously there's a huge amount of people that are involved in this, right? It's eight people or seven people, including yourself? Eight
Yeah, it's
people?
7 people, myself, and then the band version, which is scheduled to be premiered in December, is commissioned by conductor and composer Jeff Herwig, and his ensemble, the Three Rivers Wind Symphony, whose inaugural season is actually going to be starting up this year.
Right. So that's nine, nine people involved in this, 10
Give
people,
or take,
give or
yeah, and
take.
that's just for the band version,
Oh,
really, because we're developing an orchestra version too, and we're actually in the process of collaborating with Parliament Recordings on trying to record the orchestral version at some point and getting funding for an album, commercial album for that too. So
so how are you balancing? I mean, that's a lot of different artistic voices, and I know everybody's sort of contributing these different charts. How are you balancing just, the creation of the work with that many different voices, having a say in it?
that's a really great question. The first thing I want to explicitly mention, and I say this better on the website than I'm going to say it now, but the first thing that I want to mention is that there are specific issues being talked about in this piece that I cannot speak for because I've never experienced them and I never will. So the first and most important thing for me, recognizing this, is to completely step out of the way as much as possible when those specific issues are being talked about by the combo members who are going to talk about them. And for me to have a voice in any of that would just be immorally wrong and just awful. No, I can't do that. So finding a balance all of this really, I think having a clear narrative for the music specifically certainly helped a lot. And to tell you the truth, I my research for this started by just watching a lot of film and sort of getting a quasi quote unquote script, so to speak, on what this musical narrative journey could look like. I did a little bit of score studying as well for a couple of symphonies and whatnot, but I think to tell you the truth, for the specific purposes of working on this symphony, I think I got a lot more watching film and television of something that has a clear script, a clear storytelling direction and character arc and emotional arc and things like that. And that's how I ended up approaching this piece. I felt like that was going to be the best approach to do something like this because these are not just musicians on stage playing music. They're real people who have experienced a number of these issues that are going on in the world that are going to be that are going to be talked about in the piece. And it was really important that in those moments, again, I step out of the way so that their voices could be heard and things like that. Essentially, when those moments come up, each of the jazz combo members are going to be featured with their own solo, and that's where their chart comes in. They're going to be It's their own music, it's their own solo. They're actually featured in the piece at specific moments, all 6 of them at specific moments, and that's really the platform that they're creating both musically and symbolically, so to speak. And around that, basically, my role in all of this from that point is to really just talk about the conflict and especially how the pandemic has exacerbated it, especially on an economic level, especially on all of our mental health, with some things that I could speak for, like having to go on unemployment, for example, because, gigging, freelancing basically stopped for musicians. Yeah, it was very tricky. There was a lot that I had to think about, and there was a lot that had to be considered with something like this because, again, there's so much of this piece I can't speak for that it was important that these artists that I was collaborating with needed to speak for, where I didn't have a say at all.
Compositionally with this piece, is everybody involved, contributing music, a chart that they've written or something like that? Are they composing these sort of in isolation, or is there sort of, people are gelling or bouncing off each other with the composition? Is there maybe a motif or something that spans all of it that kind of connects it, or is it more like an anthology of these things that you're kind of connecting with a little bit of tissue?
I think in some respects, it sort of is a collaboration on all of those things, and I think that's just dependent on each chart, really, and the person writing it and what they have to say. The main thing that was important to me, at least, is just making sure that, narratively speaking, the flow of the piece makes sense with the integration of those charts. And that's the last thing that I'm working on at the moment. I want to make sure that my my contribution surrounding the beginning and the ending, the beginning of the chart and the ending, for example, logistically makes sense.
It's so strange, like, when you're describing this process, it almost sounds like the filmmaking process, like you're kind of this director and you're just kinda connecting things and, letting, these, people's performance kind of say what they need to say, it's interesting, from a compositional standpoint of taking that step back and sort of bigger picture kind of thing.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I'd be lying if I didn't say I haven't had that thought too, because I have had that thought from time to time, now and again. It's a very different process, really, and a little bit shocking for me as a composer too, because as you know, we want to have all the creative control. We
Right,
got to make sure
right.
every note sings perfectly,
Exactly.
that this color is exactly what I want it to be, and it can't be anything else, or things like that. And with this, it's just completely different. I have a say, so to speak, with like the larger narrative, for example, not specifically what the jazz combo was talking about, or um, what Amy's going to be doing for a sound healing session at the end of the piece. But um, I have some degree of control with, like, the wind ensemble music or the orchestral music, because that's where I'm really putting my voice, so to speak, my exploration of these issues that are ongoing. So yeah, it's been a little bit shocking at first, but honestly, I don't think this process could have worked any other way, to tell you the truth. It could have been very easy to have an even greater degree of control, because it's the composer's symphony and whatnot. It's
Right, right.
all
It's
theirs and their
so easy to
expression of this
micromanage the
stuff.
hell out of it, but
Yeah, exactly. But that's not what I wanted to do with this. That's not what I wanted to do with this, especially because the concept is so important, and also it would be a disservice to all of my collaborators if I had a greater degree of control over something like this. It's The piece is really a conversation in some ways, but it's also, again, just this exploration of all that's going on right now and all of this conflict, and in some ways a statement of saying we're not okay with all of this, and these are the bad things happening right now that we as a larger society need to recognize and address together and not fight each other over.
I know you're planning on doing an orchestral version and a band version. Are these 2 versions going to be, essentially, an arrangement of one another, or are they very different kind of approaches to the piece? Maybe how does that shape, I don't know if the collaborators are making the chart slightly different for each version. Is that shaping anything?
Between both versions, I am trying to keep the core of this composition as similar as possible as I possibly can. And in many circumstances, that's going to be that the solo flute and sound healing music is essentially the same as much as possible, or the jazz combo music is the same as much as possible. And with the combo members charts, that's not gonna change at all. I'm gonna work around that to make sure that you know that the band music and the orchestra music is what it needs to be around those moments. That's not gonna The combo members charts aren't gonna change in that respect. That being said, the way that I'm approaching both of these versions is from a from an idiomatic perspective. There's specific moments in the third movement, for example, that's written very orchestrally that you can't do with band music, like string techniques and whatnot. But there's different kinds of colors and textures that you can create with band music that can also get across the same idea. So there are some idiomatic differences, but the piece, structurally speaking, is not very different. There might be a couple of places where the key is different, so it's more idiomatic for a particular ensemble, but structurally speaking, it's very largely the same.
So I know you mentioned an album, and you're eventually going to have poets, and the conductor is one of the co-commissioners. Can you maybe just talk about the future plans you have, for this project, where you'd like to see it go?
At this moment, I'm with the amount of work that all of us have needed to put in to just get the piece done and just bring this to life. My goal at this moment is to just get everybody safely together, start rehearsing this thing, premiere it, have the premiere happen in December. If anything, I think main goal for me, what I think would be really wonderful, really, is if the conversations do continue after people hear the piece, that this is a starting point, or it could be a starting point. I mean, or it's a continuation, really, of conversations that are already happening that we need to continue having. Continued programming of the work, for example, would be great because it is in many ways a collaboration between the jazz genre and the concert music genre. Getting the album recorded would be our next main step, I think, and then just seeing where the piece goes from there. Really, I don't know. I wish I had more to say. I've just been so focused on trying to get it finished,
No, no, I
really,
totally
and
get it.
just
You get in the trenches, and you just got to get it done. And often, like, I feel like, pieces, when you get them done, they kind of take on a life of their own when you put them out in the world. It's always
yeah, definitely.
interesting. For things that are maybe a little less programmatic, or have a direct inspiration. When you write something and you're thinking of a particular thing when you're writing it, and hearing what the audience thinks the piece is about, is always very interesting, and their interpretation, or and the performer's interpretation, sometimes drastically different than what you're thinking in the moment.
Yeah, definitely. That last part you mentioned about performance intention too, that's something I've been strongly thinking about throughout my entire compositional process for this. And I think in some ways it sort of goes back to what we were talking about before, of the degree of control that I've purposely let go of as a composer for this, because this collaboration is so important, and the entire concept of the piece has to allow for that kind of stuff. So there are specific things from like the band music specifically in this that I want, that I'm looking for, but as soon as the piece is done, it's sent off and the performers start rehearsing and whatnot. And it's all theirs, really. And at that point, just want to see. At that point, like you said, you just want to see how others interpret it. And
So obviously, this piece is about these different issues from the pandemic, but can you just maybe talk a little bit about the actual technical creation issues that the pandemic brought up, and how you remedied them, like rehearsing with collaborators, remote writing, like how any of these issues kind of uh, came into effect for this piece?
Zoom was my best friend.
I think Zoom is everybody's best.
Yeah, that's the other thing is like all of us are currently placed in different parts of the country right now. So everything has just been over or everything really has just been over Zoom at the moment. And my compositional process has really continued, but I've been sending like excerpts or drafts to my collaborators, the guest artists, for example, and getting feedback from them. And just my process has been as much as possible, just talking to everybody in the group as much as possible to get their thoughts on all of this and what the concepts and what the piece is going to talk about and whatnot, just so that more of that is really expressed where it needed to be. As far as the rehearsal process goes, because we're all in different parts of the country right now, we haven't actually gotten to that point yet. And that's something we're really starting to gear towards sooner rather than later, I think. Because this premiere is going to happen really, I think, in the Pennsylvania area. So we're all going to be meeting up there for the final like rehearsals and whatnot. Yeah, this pandemic has definitely has changed the process. I think if things were different, if it was safer for us to be able to all meet up and rehearse, for example, or just have the group play together earlier on, that would have been really, really spectacular, I think. And we will definitely have an opportunity to do that, I think, before this premiere happens. That's what I'm hoping for more than anything else. But if anything, I think the technical aspects of this process has only exemplified, I think, a lot of what this pandemic has done in our society and all the other issues that have been exacerbated because of it. But I think it's also just it's made me at least drive forward more with this process. Because for a while, just this project alone was the one thing that I did to keep busy during the pandemic when I wasn't doing anything else or when there was nothing else really to do as a musician. It gave us something to do, but more importantly, I think something to look forward to be able to bring together and when it was safe to do live music.
Yeah, just a general question here, but obviously the pandemic has seen like a huge kind of shift in using technology in music, whether that's, more live streamed performances, sort of more interactive. People from all over the country can, stream the New York Phil and all these, big changes. I'm just wondering, like, are any of these kind of things going to be in the background of your mind, like even after the pandemic? Things are maybe have you changed your process, or where you think, technology and music are going to be interacting more? Just your thoughts on that whole kind of topic.
Yeah, definitely. Well, if anything, what I'm hoping for is when we start to have live music really come back, that these options that have just opened up during the pandemic, that they continue to stay open because it also opens up more accessibility for listeners who may not be able to go to those concerts in person, but they can buy a ticket online and be able to stream it. That's
I think
pretty
the
cool,
hybrid
honestly.
approach has to stay, I think,
Yeah.
for live performance.
Oh, definitely. I've been able to catch so many more concerts than I would have normally been able to because of that hybrid approach. It's really opened things up, and I think that's been great. Academia has done this for quite some time. A lot of the larger college institutions have done live streams and whatnot if they've got the technology and the accessibility for it. But to see this on a larger scale, especially with like professional orchestral groups being able to do this now, that's pretty fantastic. So yeah, I think that should be here to stay, and hopefully it will be. As far as my process goes, I don't know how much it would I don't know how much it's really gonna change because of the pandemic. I think I think it probably will just a little bit because of what I've been through and what we've all been through in our own lives. You're gonna start to see art, you know, really, really address some of these things, I think, or art, more specifically, art that's taking a different approach based on what we've learned from this pandemic and how we can apply that to like. I know I've certainly learned skills from writing the symphony that I didn't think I was going to have to learn, like creating custom fonts for notation programs as a workaround
Wow.
and stuff. Yeah, that was interesting. But if anything, technology and music were already starting to come together for quite some time now. But if it's anything this pandemic has proven, it's that process is going along a lot faster now. I think it definitely is here to stay, and it's only going to continue to grow.
Yeah, for sure. I remember a lot of ardent classical people that that this technology thing's a fad. Nothing beats acoustic only ensemble, and it's interesting that that was totally wiped off the face of the planet with the pandemic, and going forward, like you said, I think you're going to see it. That technology is here to stay, and it's going to become more and more a part of those kind of things. Like, I would never have imagined if you'd ever like attended a concert virtually where maybe the guest performer is in a different country on the other side of the planet, like streaming in
Yeah,
live. That's the kind of thing that would have never happened. And I don't even know if it has happened. I'm sure it has during the pandemic, but
yeah, I'm sure
that's
too.
this kind of thing I can see happening in the future, like no problem. It's been great talking to you about the symphony. How about you just tell me your favorite band composer and maybe the piece that got you into the composition?
Oh man, oh,
I'll put you on the spot. That's the hardest
you
question
put me
so
on the
far.
spot. It's yeah, it's a difficult question for me because there's just so many composers now who write for band that I just absolutely adore, and the band composer that got me, or the composer that really got me into writing for band music was John Mackey, because
Interesting.
John Mackey writes really fun band music for the high school level, but he also writes really good band music in general,
Right.
just
His stuff
as a
is
whole.
is really
His
great.
Yeah, his more recent work is just spectacular. It's just really wonderful, wonderful music, I
I
think.
think John Mackey is also just a great inspiration for young composers because he is entirely self-published.
Yeah, definitely. Not to mention, for the past couple of years now at the Midwest Clinic International Conference in Chicago, he has had a booth open for underrepresented composers as
Wow.
well, to just for them to be able to network with people and get their music out there and
It's
whatnot
great
too.
seeing
I
so
think
many
that's been
more of these
great.
established people doing that. I know like Christoph Beck does that for in the film scoring scene, like he's a
Yes,
big
I saw
advocate.
that.
So
Yeah.
it's great seeing these kind of established composers, especially cis white men, established composers, like understanding like, hey, I have to do more to help, underrepresented individuals in our field. And that's great to hear about John Mackey. I've never met him or seen him speak, but his music is phenomenal, and just I love hearing about him. I actually don't know if I've maybe played one or two pieces. For some reason, I
Oh, which
guess
ones? Do
I
you
oh, I
remember?
don't know. I don't remember. I feel like my my band directors didn't program him nearly as much as I think they should be. I think probably because he's not with like a major publishing place, so you kind of have to seek out his music.
Yeah, that's definitely been the struggle to a lot of people my age, including myself. Really, we tend to publish our music through other companies now because publishing companies now have been just absolutely spectacular at really representing the composers affiliated with their catalog and just really getting that music out there to their market, to their audience, to
Right.
their
I think
buyers and
I think
whatnot. That's
people
been
are
great.
often I think people are often it's entirely possible to self-publish now on the internet, right? It's so easy, and it's available and everything. It's great. You can easily make like very professional looking music and put it out there. I think what people don't realize, like the benefit of a publishing company, is like the marketing and the advertising and the pushing of your music in their catalog. Like that is
Yeah.
so much legwork for composers to do, like on their own, registering at all these conferences, pushing all their
Right.
music, like trying to
Yeah.
get it in schools and stuff. And, publishing companies do that. And, some people are like, I will not, I will be independent the whole time. I will never go to a publishing company. But, there are benefits. I definitely think it's worth it.
Yeah.
My
Definitely.
favorite Mackey piece, I don't remember it, but it's like a brass prelude or something like that. It's got a crazy amount of like 6 French horn parts or something like that. Like, but it
Is this the
starts with these.
fanfare? I think.
I
Is this
think so. It
fanfare for
starts
Full
with the
Fathom 5?
trombones just doing like a gliss down, like
Yeah, it's
that is.
fanfare for Full Fathom 5.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
That
one.
I've definitely stolen that trombone technique for my NYU orchestration class. I
Man,
just
haven't
stole
we
it.
all at this point with the snarling trombones and all that stuff?
It's great
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
my
definitely.
the composer that got me into band music was, it sounds super cliche, but it was Frank DeKelly.
Oh, Frank DeKelly writes great music. Are you
Yeah.
kidding? No, that's not cliche at all,
Okay,
man.
great.
It's great.
But it's such a great, like, he so I was in I did band in middle school, and our band director, she would like weekly like play us a piece in the literature just so that we heard something in the literature that was beyond the level of our middle school band,
Hmm.
just so we were exposed. And she
Yeah,
played
yeah. It's great.
American Algae by Frank Kelly, right?
Oh, beautiful
And
piece.
beautiful
Yeah.
piece. And I was kind of on the fence a little bit in band in middle school. I only did band because I didn't want to do PE. and
Understandable. Yeah.
that was kind of the piece that I was like, oh, you know what, this band thing this ain't bad. Like, this is a pretty cool piece. Like, I'd like to play that one day. And I get to high school, and we do that at like MPA, like my sophomore, junior year, or something like
Oh,
that. So I
nice.
finally get to
Yeah.
play this piece that I was, obsessed with in middle school. And that was kind of the moment that I was like, sitting in the room and hearing, what all these other players are playing and how they're all working together. That was kind of the moment when I was like, "Hey, this is pretty cool. I wonder, like, this is kind of the science of how this all like works together. I could get into this whole composer thing, full round circle there." And then in college, Frank DeKelly was going to be a guest conductor, and he came in and conducted a bunch of pieces, and one of them was American
Nice.
Elegy. And he talked, and then I was in the conducting class, and we got to have lunch with Frank DeKelly and talk to him
Nice.
about the pieces and stuff. And it was kind of like one of those like full circle life moments where I was like,
Oh, yeah,
this piece
definitely.
has kind of followed me all the way around, my entire life musically. And it was one of those great moments. Kind of felt like a lot of closure. I don't know. It was really kind of a weird moment, but
Wow. That's amazing to me, though. Yeah, like I mentioned, it was John Mackey that really got me interested in band music because, like you, I had been phased out of it for a while. I was still doing it, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do at the time. But then I started high school. We played Asphalt Cocktail, and that said, "Oh, this is fun again.
that's a
What
great
have I
piece.
been
That is a
missing out
great
on?"
piece.
Oh my gosh, what a shower! Just what a fantastic piece.
In my IB music class, we had to do compositions, and somebody named their composition "Concrete Margarita." As a rip on
Of
that one.
course. Oh my gosh, that's funny. I gotta say though, the moment I had a similar moment what you just described with an American Elegy, and it was with David Maslanka's music. Actually, his Fourth Symphony, which is honestly probably his most popular in the band community. His Fourth Symphony. I had the opportunity to be able to play on it at one point, and that was that was the moment for me, honestly, where like you, I just wanted to stick with music. I wanted this to be my career, and eventually, I wanted to like compose, be able to do all that. And in college, couple of years later, David Maslenka comes to my college and we play his
Yeah.
fourth symphony, and it just all came full circle like that
It's
too, and
so
it was
weird that these things
amazing.
happen the way they do,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, I
So
was
you see through the matrix at that moment. You're like, oh, so we are in the matrix.
yeah. Yeah, definitely, definitely. I was very glad to have been able to meet David Maslenko when I did, because he unfortunately passed away just a couple of years later. And but that is another. Maslenko was another composer who wrote like a lot of wonderful, beautiful, awe-inspiring music, especially for bands too. And it's just really, really glad to have been able to meet him. But to sort of really answer your question is now, I should probably mention a couple of composers that I like who are writing for band now. Omar Thomas is one of them. Jennifer Jolly, Julie Giroux, David Biedenbender, um, Kevin Day, who is actually playing on my symphony. He's one of the collaborators. He's also a
Like, I
jazz
recognize
pianist.
that name.
Yeah, Kevin Day is someone who's you need to get to know Kevin Day's music. Like if you're a composer, if you're a musician, if you just like music, you need to get to know Kevin Day's music. Like my God, this oh, he's fantastic. He just everything he writes is pure gold. I swear to God, it makes me jealous sometimes because he every because he's a fantastic composer. He's a wonderful orchestrator. He's a wonderful person, first and foremost, more than anything else, which is just wonderful. Really, it's like a great composer, but they're also a great person too. On top of that, like, and just really nice and really humble. All of that. Kevin's written a number of concerti over the past couple of years, including one that's going to be premiering this upcoming academic year, I believe. And his band music is just fantastic, and I think it's really shaping the community right now. Quite honestly, we have an initiative called the Millennium Composers Initiative that seeks to represent composers who write for like all kinds of music, regardless of their background or their style or aesthetic and whatnot too. So I've had the good fortune of being able to meet a number of them in that respect through those networks, and get to know all the composers at MCI in that respect too. There's so many more.
Yeah,
It's a great community,
it
really. It's
really
just
is,
a great
and it's so
community.
great seeing, especially when I was in college, and you'd be in music history classes and things like that. I feel like there's kind of an attitude that band music's kind of looked down on. That it's not like as legitimate as like orchestral music. And band composers aren't as legitimate as like orchestral composers. And it's so great seeing these amazing composers that are like, you know what, I'm gonna focus on band, and this literature is so good. And finally seeing places kind of take the attention of band music and go, you know what, this is really good music that needs to be studied, that should be included in curriculums. And band
Yeah,
music is
yeah,
also just like, I feel more so than orchestral music, band music is such a great pedagogical tool.
yeah. I agree.
Like
Yeah,
I think way more than orchestral music, band music is so good at teaching music through music, which is great.
yeah, definitely. All of that, and also, programming more music by living
Right.
non-white straight male composers.
Right.
That's always super helpful,
Right.
because just Beethoven and Bach
Right.
and Brahms and on every single concert is just
Right.
no,
Yeah.
wow,
Band
way
music
to
will
just limit your
always have
palate.
a new composer on a concert. I think the oldest thing I ever played in band
Excuse me.
was some of the Holtz band suites. And I mean, that's turn of the century, I guess. So it's like old, but compared to orchestral stuff, it's not really that old,
Yeah, but
It's
even
still,
so,
it's still old.
yeah, definitely,
When
definitely.
people are like, "Oh, my new music concert is performing Schoenberg," I'm like, "That's not new."
Even so, I mean, the focus needs to be on. I think the focus really needs to be on better representing living composers,
Exactly.
representative of our world and our community now, and also programming, the music of historical composers whose music had not been programmed very often, when they
Right.
were
There's
still
so
alive
many
and things like
composers
that.
that are,
Yeah,
erased, quote unquote, erased from history just because they don't get the but their music is fantastic and it should be really
yeah,
featured more. Not every
yeah,
old piece that we pull out to dust off and show the audience some cultured old music has to be like the same 5 pieces. There are so many
yeah,
great composers that are I don't even say undiscovered. We know about them. They just don't get programmed, and
yeah, yeah,
pushing for that is important, especially people of underrepresented, ethnic groups and social status that are kind of buried in history because of this whole kind of whitewashing, only
definitely,
white
yeah.
old composers getting performed. So, you know, bringing those people out of the darkness of history and showcasing like how great they were and their stories.
Yeah, programming the same holds to Mozart. It's not entirely representative of our society today. There's a bunch of living composers who write really good music, as you said, who are doing the work and need to have their voices heard and stuff like that, And it's the same with the historical composers who were not programmed enough, and dare I say, still aren't programmed enough right now because we're in that shift, really. I think, for example, if every concert on a season program had at least one piece of music programmed that was a living composer or an underrepresented composer or a historically underrepresented composer or something like that, then I think we would be in a better place. If I'm saying this correctly, if that's fair to say. But if we just stop programming all dead white male music all the
Down
time,
with
like,
Beethoven.
yeah, that would be a start.
Right.
It would be a start, I think.
Cool. Well, it's been great talking to you and catching up. It's been wonderful hearing about your symphony. Do you have social media or websites you'd like our people to go to and take a listen to your work?
Yeah, definitely. So my main website is just my name, www.joshtrentadue.com. My social media handles, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and SoundCloud. That's Trentadue Motif, Motif at the end. And my YouTube channel is just my name. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we have a website for the symphony, motifsymphony1.com. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well, just with the latest posts that we've put up for the project. We haven't done too much recently since we've been trying to get the piece done, but that's where you can find me. And yeah, it's been great talking with you. Thanks so much for having me on the show. This has been just a wonderful time. It's been great getting to talk with you again. All right. Thanks so much.
It was wonderful hearing from Josh and his experiences composing band music, working in the pandemic, and his major new project, Symphony No. 1. To hear more, be sure to check out his social media and his websites, both his own and the Symphony's websites, in the description below. Thanks again for listening to The Scorekeepers. Please rate and review us. That really helps us beat the algorithm overlords and get new listeners to find our show. And if you enjoyed this episode, please check out our previous episodes in both Season 1 and 2, available wherever you listen. And if you haven't already, check out the first episode of Season 2, where I sat down with MT Short's co-founders, Greg Camp and Sarah Ellis, to discuss their work during the pandemic. All of the links mentioned can be found in the description of this episode and on danielfarrell.com/scorekeepers. Thanks for listening.